Bannett, Bernal and Smith committed the SNP absolutely to working with everybody who favours independence. So that's what we need to see. And I'm really worried that there might be something that's not particularly dynamic or vital or vibrant enough to continue this newfound unity and common purpose. So hopefully it's going to be something big that we can all get behind and fire ahead towards independence at full speed, quite frankly.
Great. And Phil, do you have any hopes today?
Yeah, I think obviously, apart from what the guys have already said, I think unification is the big one for me. There's talk, but this is Nicola, and she needs to show what a real leader can do. And she needs to show us that and illustrate this by pulling together the organisation. I don't know what. I want to see part of this plan. I want to see how the whole Yes movement will be pulled together and helped to be pointed in the right direction. Not told, not instructed. No more blind faith. There is a limit to what we can say. I'm sure there will be some issues that perhaps have to be a little more quiet about or a wee bit more secretive about. But we do need some clear direction. How are we going to get there? And I also want to see contingency plans. Maybe not see them today, but the first document that's been issued is a good document. You know, credit where it's due. But I really think unification's key here, because if she doesn't get us all on board from the early doors, then it won't be as good as it should be for obvious reasons.
I hear we're having a few technical difficulties. Some people are hearing us and seeing us and some aren't. So if you can hear me, folks, you have to refresh your browsers apparently, and that will work. I'm just double checking here to see if that works for me. We've got to, so I'm sure Techie's working on it, but behind the scenes, at least I hope he is. I'm similar. I mean, I'm hoping that we get clarity, and I'm more interested than anything in the plan B, because I think I have no great faith in Westminster suddenly behaving in a decent manner and saying, okay, we'll give you the Section 30, we won't interfere, you make the question, you make the date. So Neil, what has to be the plan B?
Well, I think there needs. Well, I hope that we're apparently going to get some legal context for whatever the plan B is apparently today. So we need to understand how it's going to be supported in terms of the legality. But I think the obvious fallback position has got to be a website general election, and whether that is at the next Westminster election or in some other way. I think that's, you know from a long time back, Ruddy, that my opinion is that it must be a Westminster plebiscite, because that is where the Constitution notionally rests, and that is where the consent of the Scottish people is represented to continue in the Union. So to withdraw that consent, I think it needs to be a plebiscite to Westminster. So, I mean, there needs to be a range of options, and whether that is the withdrawal of MPs from Scotland to hold a separate meeting, a Grand Committee of Scotland away from the Westminster Parliament, then so be it. But we have to consider every option. I think that needs to be spelt out. I think Phil's point about obviously not revealing all of the potential avenues is a fair point, because you don't want to advise the enemy of all your actions, but actually we need to be able to bend, as I think as Alex said, bend Westminster to the will of the Scottish people and establish our claim of right. And we've got to have every card on the table, every option available to us. And to do that, we need to unite, and we need to get every independent supporting MP out of Westminster to have a meeting to talk about how we're going to behave when we are in Westminster. And we must and do that collectively, united as one.
Eva, what do you see as the plan B?
I agree with Neil that there are multiple different facets to this, and he's very right when he says independence-minded support or independent supporting MPs need to get together and they have to unite. There's no point in Nicola and Alan and other members of the leadership, including Angus and Ian, talking about unity if they're not going to put that into practice. So yes, I should have expected that in an independent supporting country such as Scotland, that those meetings would have taken place long ago. I would also hope that those councillors and MSPs who support independence would participate, so that in effect what I think Neil and I would be talking about would be an independence convention along the lines proposed by Alba last year. And had people done what they were enjoying to do last year, we would not be sitting here now wondering whether we're going to be twiddling their thumbs for much longer. So that's one avenue. Another is obviously peaceful civil disobedience, peaceful protests, and ramping up demonstrations such as those planned and already conducted by Now Scotland. They're all under one banner, marches and rallies. Hope Over Fear, which we'll have again in September. So that what we're really trying to do is to recreate, but with a more determined and urgent timescale, the Yes campaign that we had in 2014, but to build on what we learned then and to recover from any of the mistakes that were made then and since. So we have a lot of work to do, I hope, in a short time scale, and that will work if every shoulder is to the wheel, but it will not work if there are people who are being shunned and not being listened and respected to. So I would hope that every capable member of the independence movement is welcome to participate in a drive towards Independence Day, because that really is only the beginning of the hard work of creating the country that we want Scotland to be, and we know it can be.
Phil, she cannot march us up the hill again this time to take us back down again. This would be catastrophic, not just for the movement, but for her as well and her party.
And I think, yes, and I think the Yes movement is really beginning to get to grips with this. And there's a lot of credit got to go to organisations like ISP and ALBA and everybody who said, no, enough is enough. We want action now. Because I think that action and walking away, some of the strongest and most reputable and respected activists walked out of the SNP and left them bereft of some of the great people upon whose shoulders we stand in this movement. And they ought to get some thanks, because I believe it is that action that has forced the SNP to rethink and throw away the Section 13 nonsense. I mean, the Keating's case said, well, nearly 2 months ago, that we'd have to start really quickly, and even then, after the local elections, it was too late. And there's nothing about that happened under Section 30. So it was clearly nonsense from the start, and they've been caught out with that one. So, but the big one for me is let's bury hatchets. You know, egos need to be put away, and that goes for all of us. I don't really care how big you think you're, how smart you think you're, how much money you're making. This is the time when we measure men and women. Stand up for what you know is right. Put your job and your country first and your people first. None of this crap about, oh, I'm on a good ticket and, oh, everybody says I've got to do this. I mean, as Neil knows, when you're down in Westminster, the whole system's designed to turn heads. And it's very good at it. And the establishment is very good at coming in and splitting us up, divide and rule. And that's what it's done. That's where we are right now. So I need to see Nicola being what I believe a leader should be. I will forgive her if she can do that, because the elephant in the room is what they did to Alex, what has been done. Now, this is before if we get back on board and we go towards unity, I won't mention it. I'll just focus on independence, and I'll get 100% behind this. But we need to see some clarity. We need to see some honesty, some integrity for a change. And I won't cast it up. This is before we hear our leaders speak of this, or the would-be leader of the Scottish independence movement. And the other thing I want to see is who's whose cunning plan are we going to get now? Because I like the first paper we saw, but are SSRG involved? Are Salva involved? Are some of our best thinkers and strategists involved? Because Alex Salmond ain't involved in this one, and he, without doubt, was and probably still is one of our best strategists.
Absolutely.
I agree. We do need some strategy, and there hasn't been, Neil, exactly a lot, it seems, of strategy over the past 8 years, and we still don't know exactly what currency is proposed, how we're going to ascend into how we're going to get back into the European Union. Because if you're sharing a currency with England, who's a non-member of the EU, you cannot go back into the EU. I mean, this is a circle that can't be squared. We need to know those things, and borders, etc.
Yeah. Are you asking me, Roddy?
Yes, I am indeed, Neil.
Sorry. Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the frustrations that I had when I rejoined the Westminster group after being elected, and I was full of optimism and energy and desperate to start talking about the strategy for independence, and it was absent from almost every conversation, and you know, I don't think the work's been done. I don't know what direction they're pulling in, and that has to stop, because this, you know, I'm very clear. I didn't come to Westminster for a cushy number or to stay here for a long period of time or build a career or any of those things. I came down to get out of here as swiftly as possible, and that's still my intention. You know, any focus on the next 5 years, I think, is totally misplaced and absolutely should be called out. You know, and if we do end up having to go for a plebiscite general election, I'm absolutely clear that should be fought on an indie coalition basis. It should be absolutely crystal clear this is a movement and not a political party. We must make sure that it is explicit that the movement is speaking and not any single political party if we do hold a plebiscite. And of course, that will potentially involve people from not just the SNP or ALPA or other party, but, you know, other parties. We have to be magnanimous about it, because the objective is not to go down there and get comfy on the green benches. The objective in that case will absolutely be clear. It's about going down there to begin negotiations for our withdrawal from the Act of Union and withdrawal from Westminster.
Yep. If we go down the plebiscite route, Eva, it's a fact, as Neil's alluded to, there has to be a lot of compromise. There has to be absolute unity, because the last thing we want to be doing is having ISP, ALPA, and SNP all chasing the one vote to get a plebiscite election, a plebiscite victory. So everyone's going to have to work together. Everyone's going to have to make, you know, sacrifices. Some people are going to have to walk away. If we're going to get a proper plebiscite election. Do you see that happening?
I hope that it will happen, because I think that I would extend your question slightly and look at a wider remit, which is this. When the SNP were elected in 2007 and again in 2011, what Alex Salmond made very clear, as did Nicola Sturgeon as his deputy, was that it was extremely important for the SNP to show that they could provide competent government. And in the course of the last couple of years, there have been many instances where people might say that government has been less than competent. So I think that between now and either a referendum or a plebiscite, what has got to happen is that the best and the strongest and the most capable of minds within the Scottish independence movement have all to be enjoined to work collectively in terms of delivering an independence majority, whether it's plebiscite or referendum, but also to show that our government of Scots, by Scots, for Scots can be as competent as it possibly can be, because there are people who are at risk of being alienated as the result of the lack of competence shown from time to time in the fairly recent past. So, you know, I want to be positive today, but we have to be realistic too. If Scotland is to move forward and we're going to attain independence and make a success of it, then it needs every single person with ability to be involved in delivering unity, delivering independence, and then delivering Scotland as the country that it ought to become.
Phil, you know, we've said that we need unity. We can't be marched down the hill again. But it's more critical than ever, because while we're talking about this, you know, these fuel bills are racking up for people. The cost of living is going through the roof. It's really going to be a Guy Dreich winter if we don't get on the front foot.
Yeah,
how do we get on the front foot?
This is why it has to be a priority. This, if we're going to do this, and this is where we will soon. This is the measure of credibility here. Given the timescale, are we going to see a suspension of GRA and other such up till now priorities? We need a more objective view of what the EU's action is in the Russian-Ukraine debacle. So we need an assessment of the EU. Are we really going to continue? Is the SNP going to try to push us straight into Europe again? Or are we as a movement going to decide that once we get our independence? You know, these are the things that have to be given up. You can't say, this is our show, it's my ball, you're no playing. If you're going to play as a team player in this game with the ultimate goal of winning freedom for our people and our country, you need to put these childish things away. You need to behave like an adult and deal with the serious issues, specifically some of the behaviours of the European Union and the right-wing fascism that is rearing its ugly head all over Europe, the neoliberalism that is causing deaths, and the greed of the corporations. Who's going to stand up for that? Why are we apparently kowtowing? Why is our government, our Scottish government, and the majority of our MPs at Westminster kowtowing to these people and to this system, doffing the cap? No, you need to remember why you're there, who put you there, and who you serve.
Correct.
So,
and present company is excluded, of course. This man, Mr. Hanby, does not doff his cap to anybody, do you, sir? We need more like Neil here who know why they're down there and know what the job is about. I totally agree with you. And you know, Westminster corrupts, Neil. You know that.
Well, I mean, I've seen the comfort that that certain MPs in the SNP have in Westminster, and I don't just mean that they're like, you know, the trappings of being an MP, but they're chums with Tories and they enjoy the social life of being there. I mean, you know, I've said this before, but, you know, when I moved to Alapa and the SNP started to shun me, it was quite clear that they were trying to make me as uncomfortable as possible in Westminster. And that's fine by me, because I didn't come here to be comfortable. I came here to get Scotland out of this iniquitous union. And I just wish that many of them would refocus on that primary purpose that we were elected for. You know, it's disheartening, but I just hope that, you know, today we can get some unity, we get some direction and a clear strategy of how we move forward. If we don't get that, then we can consider, and I think as a movement, we have to consider how we pursue independence, because, you know, 8 years and nothing's happening is just not acceptable.
Good enough.
It's just not acceptable.
No. So hopefully in the next 6 or 7 minutes, our First Minister's going to stand up, Eva, and she's going to tell us what her plan is, this famous secret plan that we've been hearing about for years. It's about to be unfolded. Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Are you somewhere in the middle?
You can only take people at face value, Roddy, and, you know, let's forget about carrots and numerous mandates, etc. And just where we are today, we've been promised that there will be a referendum in October 23, no ifs, no buts. So the issue isn't whether or not a referendum will take place then. We've already got a draft referendum bill. It was revealed in March last year. We're not needing to write another bill. So the bill's there. It should be presented in Parliament. What we ought to be hearing today is the process that has to be gone through between the presentation of the bill and when that bill will be presented, and how the referendum will be managed, and what is it that Nicola has to announce that says that the referendum is both legally binding, meaningful and likely to be able to be enforced internationally. Those are the things that we hope have been able to be negotiated and organised in the background, because that would explain the delay between the production of the bill in March last year and the statement being made today. I don't want to think that the delay between March last year and something happening today is otherwise completely inexplicable. So hopefully there will be progress today. If there's not progress today, then those of us who want to have a unified campaign will still intend to see that, but we will be less optimistic.
Well, here she is now, folks. So it's time for us to go into the Blue Room and listen to our First Minister, and we shall reconvene
after which we'll move on to the next item of business. And I'd be grateful if members who wish to ask a question were to press their request to speak buttons now. And I call on Douglas Ross.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I wondered if that SNP applause was to make up for the people in the public gallery actually walking out as the First Minister was speaking. Because Nicola Sturgeon is at it all over again. Yeah. I is off.
Oh.
Sound, Roddy?
Forgot my mute button. Neil, was that as you expected, or was it a big letdown, or was it whatever? What's your opinion, your thoughts?
The optimist in me is excited that we've got a date, and yeah, we've got a date. My concern is that there's quite a few concerns. First of all, we are handing over the fate of Scotland formally to the UK Supreme Court to make a decision. And we haven't, well, the First Minister hasn't mentioned the claim of right or asserted it or attempted to do that. And I'm very concerned about the legal precedents that could deliver. The next concern I've got is the word hope. Around that, that's not particularly convincing. And the final one was something that I mentioned before the speech, which was the mandate in which and the constitution of the group that would be fighting a plebiscite election. She made it clear. She said, "My party will fight the next election, the next Westminster election, to secure a mandate, another mandate." So that's the cynic in me wrote down. It sounds like a manifesto for another mandate, and I want to be wrong, and I guess I need to just let things bed down. And we've got a leadership meeting in 10 minutes, so
so more people coming in and out. Don't worry about it, Neil.
I don't want to say too much until we've had an opportunity to consider collectively the implications of what's been said. There's a bit missing there for me. I saw Phil nodding. There's a bit missing there, which is about asserting the claim of right of Scotland that's been passed in Westminster multiple times and very recently. And for that to not be given any stature in the comments today is a bit of a concern, and that it now seems like a done deal that our future has been handed over to a UK Supreme Court, who, by very definition, will ultimately favour the integrity of the United Kingdom over constituent parts. And so in terms of the voluntariness of the Act of Union, I don't believe that they can be an impartial arbiter in that process. So I don't think that, Eva will have a much better legal view on this, obviously, than myself, but I don't know how they can be an honest broker in this process.
With the Seoul Convention, they showed that, didn't they? The Seoul Convention, they came down on the side of Westminster.
That's right. Well, they came down and said that it was kind of optional. It was maybe it's aye, maybe it's no. It wasn't. They said it's a convention. It's not. It didn't have enforceable jurisdiction. I don't know if that's the right word. Eva can correct me, but it wasn't an enforceable convention in that sense. So there's bits missing there for me.
Yeah, Eva.
In terms of building confidence in me.
Yeah, Eva, you are the legal one among us, and I was listening to the First Minister, and I heard these things. Now, my immediate thought was, why didn't you do this in 2017, yes. 2016, and determine it then? And so now you could then go with it. So it seems to me, no matter how I dress it up and look at it, we've wasted 7 years. We could have determined this a long while ago. Is there any reason why there would be a delay legally?
I know of no reason why there should be any delay in law, and I think where I'm seriously struggling with this whole announcement today is that the referendum bill, as I said earlier, was produced in March 2021. It was produced in time for the Scottish parliamentary election campaign. Some people, perhaps wrongly, dismiss that as yet another in a long line of carrots. But if the bill that is being published today is in identical terms to the bill that was published last year, then what has been the purpose of the intervening delay? And why are we doing this now when we could have done it earlier? But I'm conscious that some people will say that that's just sour grapes and better late than never. But I've got a copy of last year's bill here, and from what I can see, it sounds like it's just the same one that's coming out today, except that the date's been filled in. So if that's the case, then the process that is being initiated by the Lord Advocate could have been initiated in March or April last year. We could have had an answer on that. We wouldn't have to be sitting now, I suppose, in effect, trying to G people up for a positive yes campaign heading towards a referendum which has got a date, but that date is not cast in tablets of stone and will not be unless and until the Supreme Court rules in our favour. And if the Supreme Court does not rule in our favour, then any work that's done heading towards October 23 is pretty well a waste of time. So I'm slightly thinking there's a cart before the horse here. A date's been named, but it's a wee bit like, you've gone onto the internet and met some guy that you're going to have a date with, but you're messing about organising when it is that you might or might not meet up, and you're having a Zoom session or a face-to-face. It's all up in the air. So again, it's designed to look like progress, but is it really? And in terms of what will the Supreme Court do, well, I don't know what the specific legal arguments are. The Lord Advocate obviously says the Scottish Government's undoubtedly got a mandate. It's undoubtedly a significant matter. It raises, very important but unresolved issues of law, issues which could have been resolved, I think, long before now, either in the context of processes which have taken place in the court before now, or a process that could have been initiated before now. And I agree as a lawyer, it's important to act lawfully. But as Neil quite correctly says, this looks very much like surrendering Scotland's hopes and dreams of Scotland's sovereignty to the Supreme Court, which is the Supreme Civil Court of the whole of the UK. But it seems to discount, as far as I can see, completely the meaning and the impact and the force and the historical, legal and popular value of the protocol and the actual sovereignty of the people. I'm struggling to understand why we're following this process at this late stage, but it's probably better late than never.
It's quite worrying. Taking the legal side out of it, Phil, correct. I mean, you've been an MP just as Neil is, and surely we could have cut, as we say, we've surrendered to the Supreme Court. Would it not have been better politics? And please feel free to correct me, as to have said, we want to have this. We're going to have a referendum on the 23rd. It is on the 19th of October 2023. It will be consultative, like all referendums in the United Kingdom. But here's the sting in the tail now, Boris. If you don't cooperate with us and help this smooth transition, we will be holding in 2024, when you go to the country, we will be holding a plebiscite election, and every single election, be it in Holyrood and or Westminster, will be the same. And that way we would have cut out handing over our fate to the English Supreme Court, or UK if you prefer. I prefer to call it the English Supreme Court. Surely that would have been better politics. And I'll get Eva's legal view after.
Yeah, the first thing that jumps out to me is who's behind this. This is not the best plan I've heard. Okay, this is not the safest, cleanest route to independence. A few points. The first thing is that has to be said. I love today's subject. We're talking finally after 8 years about independence. So that's the first thing. The second point, credit where it's due. The first paper published on the 14th of June was called Independence in the Modern World, okay? About wealthier, happier, fairer, Nordic countries, all the stuff. This was basically the start of Nicola's speech, okay? Then she came on something that really, really worried me. She said about the mandate. She says, those who live here, that's what the referendum's going to be out. That's the local mandate. It's going to be the local franchise. It's the local franchise she's going to use again, the flawed local franchise. When you say those who live here, those who are passing through, students, etc., should not be deciding the constitutional future of the people of Scotland. Yeah. The next one, when she talked about the Section 30, we've already talked about Keating's critique on the timing for a Section 30 this late in the game, unless there's a shortcut over at the lawyers for that. Called it a process, okay, with everybody else on the lawfulness of this, but it doesn't have to be this. There's other lawful ways of doing it. Don't like the Parliament to scrutinise and pass. Handing over is crazy. The other one that jumped out a lot was legal challenges would delay. Well, if legal challenges would delay, what's your workaround? What's your strategy here? The ninth, something Neil picked on. How many times did you hear hope? We hope. We make an application. We trust. We would like. Not good enough. Who's in control here? Then we go on to the 10th point I picked up, which is it's all made for the court to determine. You ask a lawyer a question, and sorry about this, Eva, but if you ask a lawyer a question, the straight answer is going to be, well, it depends. And it always is the same, and you end up paying yay or nay. So again, hope creeped into that one. Not good enough. This is like, why don't you ask Kenny Dalglish? Maybe he's aye, maybe he's no. It's like, and the other thing that jumped straight in here was, did you hear the blame in Westminster if it fails already bit? Did you hear that bit? You play this back, and if it fails or is delayed, then it's Westminster to blame. We've already got a fall guy. What? Where is that? It just pisses you off, you know. Another one, okay, the big positive was the plebiscite. The big positive out of that, the real disappointment in pushing for a plebiscite was something, again, that Neil picked up on. My party will fight this in the UK election. My party. On this single point, not the yes movement. Where's the unification we so desperately need? And the other one, no mention of claim of right or Salvo or SSRG. These are people are not involved. Their best minds are not involved in this. We've got people who are, no, leave GRA for a wee minute and come do some work on this. Nah. And then we've already talked about the blaming Westminster. We have wasted a lot of time here. That's been pointed out. But overall, it's not strong enough. We should be taking control. But we must back it. We must get behind it. We have got to get it behind it. But we've all got to fix a few. There's a few key issues in this process that you keep calling it that need to be fixed. One, the unification or lack thereof. Two, no, it's not just the SNP. You're where you are because people haven't woke up to how much you walked away from this when the rest of us pushed you into it. This is better than nothing, but a fear. My original fears are not allayed. This is not a cunning plan, more cunning than a bag of weasels. It just isn't.
I apologise for my phone going off there. It was people should invite me out for a pint tonight. Eva, you've got some information on the new draft bill, I believe.
I've got a copy of it here, Roddy, so I've had a quick comparison as between the bill published today and the bill published in March last year. And the main difference is that there is a date mentioned, but it's not a date cast in tablets of stone, as we said earlier. The bill says the date on which the poll will be held is 19 October 2023, unless before then regulations are made where Scottish ministers consider that it is impossible or impracticable for the poll to be held on that date, or it cannot be conducted properly if held on that date. So that's a pretty wide-reaching, far-reaching provision. So when is a date not a date? Because I think that's where we are. On the positive side, though, I would just remind you that the process that Nicola has announced today is very, very similar, if not identical, to the proposals put by Christopher McElhenney when he was booed at the SNP conference in 2019. So yet more proof that the people in Alba knew what they were doing long ago, were discounted, and again the SNP are having to copy Alba members' views from long ago. So perhaps if more heat had been taken of Chris at that stage, we could have been independent by now.
Indeed. Neil, I know you've got to go to this meeting. Yeah, just a quick question, if I may, before you go. Maybe it's the old cynic in me, but this, when she announced that we were going to send this to the Supreme Court, and so it's sub judice, so no one questioned me about this and put me on the spot. And also, we're closing Parliament in 3 days, so, well, no one else can question me, and it'll be summertime, and it's kicked into the long grass, and we're left, you know, doing our thumbs between now and when the Parliament reconvenes. Or am I just a cynic?
Well, actually, it just occurred to me when you were saying that, Roddy, that actually creates a space to have a conversation about the bit that's missing, the bit that SSRG have been looking at, the bit that I have a sense that we'll be discussing. And so that's an opportunity for us to fill that space. It's not about the process that she's begun, because it's explicitly not been mentioned. And so there's an opportunity for us to begin to put a bit more detail on what that might look like and to advance that argument, because that's not part of what she's set out. So with that, I'm going to have to disappear because I'm late.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Well, just Neil, before you go.
Just hang on, Mark and Yvonne, welcome.
Hi, guys.
We've held Neil long enough, Mark. We'll have to.
Well, just before you go, Neil, just to remind you that I'll be talking about the meeting at the end in Dunfermline on the 29th, 30th, and 31st. To try to begin to put the puzzle pieces that are missing from this into place. So
good stuff.
Thank you, Neil. Catch you later.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Yvonne, Mark, welcome. I'll be with you in a second, Mark. Yvonne, did you get a chance to hear the First Minister's statement?
I did. I listened. I was on the train from Darlington to Newcastle, and it was very thin gruel to my mind. It was full of ifs, buts, and maybes. No nod or recognition of groups like SSRG, all under one banner, any of the Yes movement, and it was really like watching a magician pulling the rabbit out of the hat while up to all sorts of jiggery-pokery with the other hand. I just felt very underwhelmed by it all. She's surrendered Scotland's sovereignty to the Supreme Court, and as you quite rightly call it, the English Supreme Court. It's for an independence declaration, it had to be one of the most underwhelming of political speeches to have come out of Holyrood.
So I can take it you're sitting on the fence here. Not impressed would be the best way of summing you up.
No, I'm not impressed at all. And as I wasn't comforted by the fact that she kept going on and on about the law. She should have made, the most powerful speeches are the shortest. She should have just stood up and said, this is what we're doing, this is what we're rolling out, and this is the date. Instead, it was like listening to a lawyer. Apologies to Eva, but it was like listening to a lawyer who was, full of ifs, buts, maybes, provisos, caveats. I wasn't, as I say, I was underwhelmed by it all. I'm really disappointed.
Mark, your good self, were you underwhelmed, overwhelmed?
I take a somewhat contrarian view. I was encouraged. At the very least, she set out different scenarios. I mean, at the very least, she went beyond simply, Boris, can we have a Section 30 order? No, okay, we won't have independence. She did go through that, and just kind of understanding her perspective. She has to live within the Holyrood, environment where which is a creature of Westminster, where the Scotland Act is basically just a modern day colonial charter, and that she has certain constraints she has to live within. And so she's somewhat limited in the way that she can do it. I'm sure she would have loved to declare, "Scots are sovereign, we have the claim of right," but it's not a right. It's actually, that's more of a right that's Westminster's approved rather than what the Holyrood government has approved. So I was encouraged. I think that they're off on the right. I mean, I understand all of your critiques about what it lacks. It certainly lacked a lot, and using should rather than will, and all of these other things. But I was especially encouraged when she said that, okay, if that doesn't work, then if Section 30 doesn't work, okay, then we'll do this, and then we'll do this. There might need to be a couple more of this. That will do this if this is blocked. But I was encouraged by it. But I certainly agree that if it does get to the point of a plebiscitary election, that there has to be, not just the SNP, there has to be deep cooperation between ALBA and the other parties, because after all, they're only supposed to be there for 5 minutes once they get elected, if it gets to a plebiscitary election. So, I take a somewhat contrarian view. I was more encouraged, and again, at the very least, she set out, okay, if this doesn't work, we'll do this, and if this doesn't work, we'll do this. So she's got 3, plans, and the first one probably will fail automatically. But I do agree that, I just think that, I understand all of the arguments that you made about it being lawful and that you would surrender to the Supreme Court. I get all that. But it's just the reality of what they have to work with at this point. So, that's my view, but I was heartened. I'll just put it up, moderately heartened by it. And again, at least she's considering more than one scenario.
But Eva, was it just me being paranoid or cynical again? But I didn't hear her once referring to the Yes movement involving others, pulling the whole movement together. Did I miss something, or did you hear anything that made it sound as if it was anything other than it's my ball and my game? By the way, sorry, before you answer, Yvonne, could you put it on mute at the moment, because we're getting a lot of road sound? Excellent. Sorry, Eva, on you go.
Yeah, I think that I was a bit disappointed in the reliance on law and the legalities of this, because so much of Scottish history and Scottish politics have to do with the sovereignty of the people. So if I put that to one side as being a disappointment, the other disappointment was, as you rightly point out, a lack of expression of the wealth that there is within the country and in the Yes movement as such. The word unity is probably overused, but I think we should have had some sort of welcome and a kind of enfolding of arms around the whole of Scotland, rather than just saying Scotland's got the right to choose and the people of Scotland have to be heard. We're fed up hearing that. What we're needing to hear is, let's all go for this together, because this is the best thing that could ever happen to us. So that's a disappointment, but it's underscored by, as Neil and Phil referred to, this issue that if we don't get what we want from the Supreme Court and we don't get Section 30 either, then the next general election will in effect be what you might want to call a plebiscite, where her party will set out a vision as opposed to saying, we're going to make it a straight yes, no, and it's the yes movement against the Better Together movement, if you like. So I think that we're being set up to an extent what that next general election might comprise. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that we get a Section 30, but I'm scared that a Section 30 will be offered and accepted on the basis of a three-way vote where DevoMax is on the table, and that might be accepted as an easy option. I'm also concerned that we lose in the Supreme Court too, and then we get to the next general election and it splits on party lines because the leadership of the SNP and the Greens will not allow other independent supporting parties to participate to the full extent that Scotland's people need and deserve, and to an extent are already demanding.
Phil, in my Pulitzer Prize piece today, I did write that parties that are fighting among themselves never win elections. But the yes movement fighting among itself and in a civil war, you're not going to win a referendum, are you?
No, that was possibly the most disappointing, other than the big boy did it and ran away excuse. They won't let us do it excuse that came out many, many times, blaming Westminster already. If it doesn't happen, if we're allowed, if this is, it was too weak. It was pathetic, and it really did make me angry. I thought about this and I thought, this is our leader fighting for our independence. It doesn't sound like that. It sounds like someone who wants another couple of elections under her belt. That's what it sounded like to me. It's like I think somebody mentioned it earlier, but there's the plebiscite gets her another election for my party. It's not your party. Nicola needs to remember it's not her party, it's our party. It's one of our parties. And it's our independence movement in our country. And she's clearly forgotten all about that. So the ego needs to be left behind. There's a few serious corrections that needs to be made here. One is the unification issue. Two is listening to people like Mark and Sarah and the SSRG and Salvo, who are our experts on this very complex issue. I mean, who came up with this cunning plan? I looked at the original document that was written, Independence in the Modern World, and I could see, I don't want to say, but there's some people I think I know who would have been involved in it, but I don't believe we've got the best people on that. And the whole, I'm with Mark in one sense that at least there are alternatives here, but this smacks of desperation. This smacks of being called out and being basically faced with the reality that the people of Scotland are beginning to turn and say, no, we want independence. We want to listen to alternative ways of getting it. And you've not done enough in 7 years, 8 years now. And all of a sudden we get this. Yeah. Now, I don't want to be cynical, and I feel some positivity about it, that we're talking about it, and I agree with what Mark's saying, but there was just too many negatives on that for me to get passionate about it. I mean, one of the things I said, we have to battle, we have to fight this, but Nicola has to give on this. She needs to give access to the yes movement, to listen to what we want, to listen to the experts out there, because I fear, is something I've articulated before, this is almost like a set up to fail. There's an aspect in it, and I don't want to be negative about it. I don't want to be, but I can't help. I'm old enough to be cynical. I've earned the right to be cynical. And Nicola has not yet earned the right to have my unquestioning faith.
Okay. I wanted to intervene quickly, and I think that maybe again, being fair, just taking things into consideration, maybe this parliamentary speech was not the place for her to ask for the reunification of the yes movement and to bring all these things together. She will hopefully have these opportunities, and she will hopefully avail themselves
She
of it,
better.
you know. But you know, I can see, okay, we have to talk about the legal route, blah blah blah, and everything with all of the criticisms that you legitimately made. But maybe that wasn't the point, to make some rabble-rousing speech about bringing the movement together, this type of thing. But she will need to have avail herself of these opportunities, and to bring it together, because or else, if she doesn't, bring on the Alba party and anybody who's perfectly willing to, make a significant contribution, and we're all out there. There's no question about it. But if she doesn't avail themselves of that, then it's gonna be very extremely problematic.
Yeah, Yvonne, we didn't wait around for the unionists to respond, but I'm sure we can all imagine and work out, because if we've been stuck in neutral for 8 years, they've been stuck in neutral forever, and it'll be the usual stuff. But today it's a better day for them. They've got till at least 2024 before they have to worry about Scotland exerting its right. So unmute yourself, Yvonne.
Oh,
Yvonne, you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Right. Apologies for the sound. I'm just driving back to Scotland now. As I keep saying, I'm really, I'm a person who's normally optimistic, and I expected her to go in with some swagger and the delivery of a leader. But this was like a surrender speech. It was very servile. It was pitiful, really. We're talking about the independence of Scotland, and she was talking ifs, buts, maybes, and kowtowing to the Supreme Court. I'm still lost for words, and very downbeat about it. And with all due respect, Mark, I think you're on the deck of the good ship Lollipop, because I couldn't find anything in that speech that gave me any comfort at all.
okay, that's fine.
We're all entitled to opinions. I'm delighted to say we've got another guest just about to join us. If Techie can bring in, Tommy Sheridan's about to join us, and Phil's going to take a wee rest and have a wee cup of tea.
Oh, yes, jolly good.
Yeah. Can you do that, Techie? Apparently not. So you have to hang about for a minute. So, Mark, did you see anything referencing to your good selves at the SRG? You want to get in your advert now? You can do it again. Get your advert in.
Yes. We will be holding. I, like everybody else, saw a puzzle with a limited number of pieces that need to be filled in. And we are holding our conference, the SSRG conference in Dunfermline, the 29th, 30th, and 31st of July, in just over a month. We're still working out the technical details of selling tickets, but they're £25 for 3 days. We've got some excellent speakers, hopefully even the big man himself, to participate, and many others, Alf Baird, Tim Rideout, Richard Murphy, and numerous others. Again, we're still working out some technical details of selling the tickets, but they should be on sale, officially on sale very soon. But we really want to try to get the put in more puzzle pieces and bring the parties together, bring the experts together, and whatever the Scottish government's doing in terms of planning, we need to at least do parallel planning, because that we don't know what they're doing, and I don't know how much they're going to be able to disclose during this time, and they have to worry about if they bring up something, we'll have a new Scottish pound, the media is going to just be blasting cannons at them over it, so I think we're in a position to do research and do planning that can always be converged with whatever the Scottish government has been doing. But we also want to be to steer the direction in a better, I don't know what the Scottish government has planned, but it sounds kind of neoliberal from my point of view, and I'm sure that Tommy and others would agree that once the independence is achieved, that there has to be a huge amount of effort going into steering Scotland to be, a more socialist, a more fair country. I'm not sure what Nicola Sturgeon has in store. I have no idea.
With views at that, you can come back anytime you like, Mark. Anytime you like, mate. Welcome, Tommy. Just when I see your face come up on the screen and someone says neoliberal, it just doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem right, my friend.
Roddy, can I apologise? My fault. I was looking for the link on my email, and you, in your infinite wisdom, sent it to my Twitter, which I hadn't been on for the last day or so. So I apologise for missing the link.
It's better late than never, and it's always a pleasure to have you.
However,
I just want to say, how can I ask for your views on what you thought? Were you excited or whatever?
Well, this is probably the important point, because I've listened to some of the chat there, and I'm always it's always a pleasure to listen to good voices within the independence movement, particularly those that you've assembled here who have between them years and years of collective commitment on the stump and building the independence movement. My take on all of this, Roddy, I've got to say, is probably more optimistic than the chord that I've heard being struck so far. And that is, I wanted a date. We got one. Some people will say, well, is it illegal? Is it an effective referendum? We don't know yet. That question is going to be determined legally, and the wheels have been set in motion to allow that to be checked. Rather than put off a date has been set, which I argued for and called for, and I'm happy with. But the most important part of the speech that was made today, and the reason I'm quite enthusiastic, actually, and I would ask all of us to consider it. Maybe I'm just naive. I've never been in the SNP, so I'm probably given an opinion which isn't based on any knowledge of the individuals involved, because I know that sometimes when you know somebody, then you maybe think twice about what they're saying, because you know what they used to say or what they say in other forums, etc., etc. So with all of those types of conditions attached, I'm going to say that what I thought was vitally important was her commitment, and I wrote it down. She says that if the referendum is ruled illegal, then the SNP will fight the next general election on a single platform of should Scotland be an independent country. She says it will be a single general election platform. Well, Roddy, I've got to say, in 1992 manifesto of the SNP, that's effectively what it said. The way to deliver independence is to send enough MPs to Parliament, a majority of MPs to Parliament. It appears to me that what she's been forced into today is a commitment to return to what was the previous SNP position on how to deliver independence, and that is that you win a majority at Westminster election. Now, I'm going to swear by mentioning the name Thatcher, but that's what she said as well, remember. The Scots want independence. All they need to do is send a majority to Westminster. Well, it appears to me that what she's done here today, and I know a number of you will say, well, she says these things before. I think this will be a very difficult one to get out of. Because what she said is, if the referendum next year is deemed illegal, the SNP will fight the next general election. And as I say, I wrote it down because I thought it was significant. A single general election platform should Scotland be an independent country. I've been arguing that. You've been arguing that. We've been arguing that should be the position, that we shouldn't be asking for permission for referendums. If they're not going to allow referendums, then we fight an election and we ask the people. And if we win a majority at that election, then we start to negotiate our independence. That's the way most other countries have become independent throughout the last 50 years. So, I think there's a lot in there, Roddy, that is worth being optimistic about. And I think we've got to strike an important chord here, because we're part of the independence movement. I think we now have to become the most enthusiastic part of that independence movement. And we make sure that nobody keeps us out, nobody keeps us off platforms. We build as much momentum as possible behind this potential referendum on the 19th of October. And if it's deemed illegal, then we don't allow that general election, next general election, to be fought on anything else but independence.
I agree with you. I would tell you, as an old SNPer, from 1934 till 1999, plebiscite elections was the SNP policy. Then, with the advent of the new parliament, it was then dropped. But I agree. As you know, I've been writing, going back to 2019, before ALBA, before ISP, I was saying let's have a plebiscite election. I believe it to be the way forward, and for numerous reasons. I don't know what you think about this one, Eva, but if we're fighting a referendum on the date of the 23rd of October, 19th of October 2023, then the union can do what they did last time. They can focus all their guns on that referendum and do what they do and unions do best and muddy the waters completely. However, if they're fighting a general election, they'll be that busy fighting to get the big boys' seat down in London that they won't put half the attention into Scotland than they will do on a referendum. So I think a plebiscite is the best way forward. Actually, personally, I've got to say, I hope the Supreme Court says no, you can't do it. Although whatever happens, I'm all in. I'm sure like everyone on this table, I'm all in. But I think a plebiscite's the best way forward. Eva, what about you?
I would have said so a couple of years ago, Roddy, but the concern I have about that now is what I mentioned earlier in relation to the current Scottish Government displaying competence in government. So I think that at the moment we're in danger of jeopardising a fair size of the vote with folk, especially women, that don't like some of the behaviour of the SNP generally and some of the positions that they're taking on various matters. You know what all the controversial issues just now are. So I would probably more tend to the view that if we're having a plebiscite in the next general election, that it should be fought on a yes platform against others as opposed to SNP only against others, because I think there's a number of areas where the SNP are weak. But in theory, yes, I like the question. I like the principle of a plebiscite. But I wish that we'd had all of this resolved a long time ago.
Yeah, I agree.
So I know it seems niggardly, but I would like some answers as to why it's taken so long to get from that bill that was drafted in March 21 to only presenting it formally in June 22, because I think that that's going to jeopardise real progress and real certainty. I should say, Roddy, I see on Twitter that there's a lot of people saying, this is great, we've got a date, let's work towards the date. I think some folk are not realising that date may come and go. So yes, it's good that there's a date, but I think it's a date in principle. It's not necessarily going to be the date when a referendum does occur. I think everybody here knows there's a reasonable prospect of a general election occurring before October 23. There's a lot can happen between now and then. If I was Boris Johnson, I'd be thinking along the lines of having a general election before then. I know that seems unlikely, but I don't think it is that unlikely. And if I was him, that would be a great way to spike our guns.
Well, I'd say I'm with Tommy in this. I think we should be glass half full going in here. But Phil, there is a possibility that the unionists who are more organised than us nowadays, they might decide if we're going to have a plebiscite election that they will start doing deals and putting one unionist up in each constituency.
Here's where they'll do that anyway. They're going to do that anyway. They've been playing the game in a way that SNP have failed to play the game. SNP have failed to show loyalty to the independence movement by recognising the efforts of other independence parties like ISP, like Tommy's parties in the past, and like ALBA right now. Here's where my uber cynicism comes in, and it's based on corporate operations and working in strategies on this kind of stuff. So I don't think there's going to be a referendum in 2023. Devo Max, right?
Mm-hmm.
We already have. I mean, we've already got it. There's a fear that might come in. Apparently, we've already got DV Max because it was promised, wasn't it? That might spike it. Another reason to spike it. But here's my biggest fear. According to the rules, and correct me if I'm wrong, even the next general election can be no later than the 24th of January 2025, which is 2.5 years away. Or if MI5 continue to have the leverage they certainly have on Nicola, then what can they do about that? But more concerning, a snap election, it's not Boris that makes these decisions. The Conservative Party and the establishment it works for is a very organised and ruthless organisation. Boris and his cronies will get his payoff from the City of London when they've carried the can for Brexit. Their time is running out. They've been caught with their hands in the bread tin too many times. And even for the Tories, even the Tories are getting a wee bit embarrassed with what's going on. And that's saying something, because to embarrass a Tory like that takes you some distance. So I fear a snap election could be easily managed. It's coming anyway. We know it's coming. So what if the English court draws out the decision on the legitimacy of this referendum to just prior to a snap election being called by the British government sometime next year, say in the summer or early autumn? Then you have another 5 years before your plebiscite, because as we know, as we have argued, it really has to be in the Westminster Parliament and not the council that is the Scottish Parliament. That's
I believe that gives a certain degree of flexibility. I mean, if they did call one before, if Boris Johnson fell and there was one before that, there's nothing to stop the SNP and organizing with, maybe I'm being overly optimistic, naive, that may be, but that they could say, okay, well, hell, let's just make this plebiscite and then even if it wasn't accepted, at least maybe that would give more legitimacy and purpose to, referendums. I don't know, who knows?
I'd like to believe that, Mark, but I don't. You just listen to the qualification and the caveats that were laid around the legality and the process. This is a process. How many times did you say it? Blame Westminster if it doesn't happen. We must ask, I hope, we want, we plead. There's just too much of pathetic weaselness about it. We need some gumption, and I really don't want to do this. I really don't want to do it. But this is our shot at the title. And I'm not happy with the contender, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Well, nice one. Tommy, I'm more of thinking realistically, and the Tories have got, a 78 majority now, or 76, is it? Majority. They've got till December, I think it's December 2024, before they have to go back to the country. That's the maximum time. Why with a 76, 78 majority would they want to go? Especially when the polls are going down the way. So I think we're quite safe in the 2024 date. I could be wrong. I can't think of any reason why they'd want to call a snap election.
I share your scepticism on that, Roddy, and I think it's much more likely that Boris would be replaced than they would go to a snap election. Johnson will not, I think, lead the Tory party in another election. I think it's impossible to have a Tory leader lead the Tories into an election when 42% of his own MPs have got no confidence in him. It is a godsend for anybody. I mean, Starmer is an absolute establishment toady, but even he couldn't miss that particular open goal.
Who prevents his MPs from being on the picket line with striking workers?
Listen, Mark, the guy actually enrages me more than Johnson. I despise Johnson. I absolutely despise him. But Starmer's worse. The guy is a snake, an utter snake. And I just done a piece there. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have already read the Corbyn interview on Declassified UK. It should be required reading in every single school and college all across England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, just so everybody can see the anatomy of the British state and what it actually does behind the scenes and how they destabilise anybody that's a threat
And how
to
to
the British
take someone
establishment.
like Corbyn, good socialist, drive him out through propaganda about anti-Semitism, and put in a Blairite establishment.
That's the point I'm making, Mark. The British establishment would be happy with Starmer in power, is what the point I'm making. It's to back up the point that Roddy's making about why would they risk or why would they go for a snap election with Boris at the helm? Why on earth would they go with him at the helm? The guy who was an electoral bonus for them at one time because of his brash, abrasive, get Brexit done populist idea and manner, has now become a complete and utter liability for them. And I don't see them going for a snap. I think what they'll do is they'll snap his neck politically, and he'll be out the way before the next election. However, I return to my optimism, and I do argue, and Phil and I kind of a chat about this over a wee coffee, and we'll have a friendly chat, of course, because we're comrades. But I am going to stick with my glass half full point of view, because up until an hour or so ago, I didn't know any timetable for deciding the question of our independence. I feel we've now got a timetable. And I think that timetable is at the latest 2024, a general election of 2024, which is likely to be spring. Failing that, we've got it earlier in October of 23. And I feel that the independence movement has been, for the last couple of years, completely lost with a lack of anything tangible to get our teeth into. Because we felt 17, 18, 19, we felt that there was going to be a new NDRF 2. I was quoting chapter and verse the Northern Ireland Act and the 7 years definition of a generation. It was all there in black and white. We knew that there was a legal right to have that referendum, so we were expecting it. Now, obviously, COVID came along. I think the SNP were wrong to suspend the campaign for COVID, and I certainly think they were wrong to say we're going to recover first, then we'll restart the campaign, because it does beg the question that how can you recover as part of the British Union? You can't recover. All you'll go back to is low wages for carers, is low pensions for pensioners, is a pathetic minimum wage. That's all you go back to. You don't recover. So from my point of view, they were wrong to do all of that, but Personally, I feel the pressure both in the rank and file of the SNP and out with. I think some of the pronouncements that Alex has made recently and some of the key interviews he's been given, I think the presence of Alba, okay, we've no set the heather alight in terms of winning elections, but I know from experience with small parties, it takes a while for you to distill and to actually get that level of support to win elections. But what the Alba Party has done is it's attracted the best, the cream of the activist base of the independence movement. No doubt in my mind that it's done that. And that has set warning bells and alarm bells off in certain sections of the SNP. And therefore, I look at this speech today, Roddy, not in any way, shape, or form as a glass half empty. I look at it glass half full, because I think our pressure collectively has forced Nicola to do something. And it's now been done. A date, potentially, for a new referendum. And if that doesn't work, a commitment that the next election will be a plebiscite election. You and I talked about this, Roddy, on various platforms, various shows, and we said, wouldn't it be great if we had a plebiscite election? We said, oh, the SNP will never go for it. Well, they've just done it. They've just announced that they're doing it. And therefore, that is enough for me to feel that we should have the glass half full approach. And I've got to say, I think the wider movement, because I always think, we analyse everything that's written, everything that's said, we dissect it. I think the general mass of the movement doesn't do that. I think they're more involved in their everyday struggles just to make ends meet, keep their jobs going, look after their families, all the rest. I don't think they've got the time that us uber activists have got, and the commitment that we've got. I think the wider movement here is going to be enthusiastic, and I think it's important that we strike that chord.
Well said, Tom. I agree with you about Alapa having the cream. Obviously, they've got the cream.
And also this coming about because of Alba's existence and because they lost so many really amazing activists. People.
Again, I agree with you. I agree with you. Eva, I don't want to get my good friend here, Tommy, getting upset and spitting at the screen. But you look at Boris and you look at Starmer and you think, Thatcher maybe wasn't that bad. Compared to look at these two, I mean, they really are. The British Union has never been more weak. It has never been less efficient. It's never been more ready for us to kick an open door.
Or in lower repute.
Yeah, well, exactly. But the thing is, Eva, that I don't know if Nicola just paid lip service today to the referendum, because I think maybe I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. I think she realises that the way forward for us is plebiscite. I've never been in favour of a referendum again. And I think plebiscite is what we should all be working towards. Although I will push at everything that gets us to independence. I think our long term, our strategy should be aiming for December, spring, whatever, 2024.
Yeah, well, I agree with what others have said in relation to Johnson and Starmer are really kind of the front men, and the power is really behind the scenes within the establishment. The folk that you don't see and that we don't really know who they are, the men in grey suits, etc. And those are the people who will decide whether or not we have a plebiscite or whether there's a general election before then. So, I misspoke when I said Boris will call a general election. I don't think he will. I agree with Tommy, his days are numbered. But I do not rule out the prospect of his successor looking to do what he and Theresa May before them spoke of, which was getting the validity of being elected Prime Minister in their own right, as opposed to inheriting a position. And so I think that there's a distinct possibility of a general election before October 2023. And if that happens, and if the Supreme Court does not rule in our favour, then our plebiscite is lost for several years. So that's not to say that I don't welcome a plebiscite as a general election, but I think that there's still a lot of pitfalls between now and being able to have that independence vote. So in terms of the bigger picture, I think that there's, as Tommy said, very many people who support independence who don't really care about the nuts and bolts, and they just want to know when it is that they're going to be able to vote, and between now and then to be active and do all they can to bring it about. But we're far from really making any real progress today. We've got some things happening, we've got a date, we've maybe got a line in the sand, maybe not. And isn't it all happening just because there's pressure on it from other sources? Is it really happening because it's genuine? Does it matter if it's genuine as long as it's happening? And at least we're all talking about independence.
Yeah, but before the thing we've got to do, Phil, I've mentioned it a couple of times, we've got to unify the Yes movement again as it was in 2014, 2012, 13 and 14. There has to be a coming together again. There has to be an unity, whether it be for a plebiscite or a referendum. How do we do that? You're on mute, Phil.
You muted, Phil.
Well, we don't is the answer to that. It's down to the SNP to do that if it's going to happen. But here's the thing. I talked earlier in the first critique or assessment of it, because there was a lot of positive stuff in there as well, about there has to be unification. And I didn't see any of that. It was my party. It was we. They're going to use local government franchise. It's the same bloody franchises last time. So
I want to get onto that after you speak.
You've got it, Mark. You've got to come in on that one. But the big one for me on the unification front, what I said was that Nicola and the other leaders in the SNP have to put their egos aside and put the people in the country first. And the reality is that maybe we're just going to have to be big enough to say they're not going to do it. But here's here's our shot at it. And here's the thing. Would the passionate, the driven activists who left SNP to fight for independence, would they give their SNP the vote in a plebiscite election if it meant independence? Yes, we would. Yes, they would. I'm still, I believe, part of the SNP, and I want to change it from the inside. I feel the leadership are almost untouchable. They weren't listening, but they've got to listen to membership numbers, to revenue, and to public opinion. Eventually, you get through to them, and there's no doubt in my mind that the actions of others and other parties have influenced this action that we see now. So I think we're the ones that are probably going to end up having to bite the bullet and say they're not going to give in, they're not going to fix or admit their mistakes and what they did to Alex and what they've done to others, and pushing things like GRA. They're not going to, they should be resting GRA and all these other issues and focus on the job at hand and the prime directive, which has to be the freedom of our people and the welfare of our people, which can only be brought about by an independent country, putting its people first and not the military industrial complex, the City of London, Big Pharma, the corporations. You know, this is who we are. This is what we believe in. And for our principles, the principled ones, many of whom have walked away, I think are far more likely to bite the bullet and vote for people that they feel may be disingenuous for the cause. And that's probably what's going to have to happen.
Mark, you wanted to come in there.
Yes, just talking about the mechanics, if it is a referendum in whatever way, Section 30, non-Section 30, it has to be done in a much, much better fashion than it was in 2014. I was at the count at the Emirates Arena in Glasgow, and a lot of the services were outsourced. Who knows who took the ballots from the polling stations to the Emirates Arena?
Yeah.
They took it, pumped it out. You could like mark. There were a lot of people that were kind of behind these barriers, and you could kind of mark, yes, no, kind of thing. But they put them in these stacks. You had no idea. It was all done by, as far as I understand, hired people from companies to come and administer it, but you had no idea of the integrity. And then the postal votes, and there was a UN report, I believe, that said that the postal votes in Great Britain are childishly easy to falsify. That has to be resolved. The franchise, as you mentioned, just the whole idea that it can be a local franchise. Anybody who just happens to live there can vote on a constitutional issue. I live in France. I have a UK membership. Before Brexit, I could vote in the European elections and the local elections, but not any referendum or presidential. And I understand that. I'm not a citizen. I know that you, Roddy, and that living in Catalonia or Spain. So these things have to be, examined. And I don't know what's in that, what's in this bill. And I remember going through this was like 3 or so years ago. I remember getting copies of the referendum bill that they put up. They hadn't passed it. There's just hundreds of pages. I mean, just unbelievable with all these addendums. I don't remember exactly, but it was just so long. And it's just like, how do you even how does any one person begin to absorb this and follow these rules that they're doing? Just keep it simple, and there can be simple ways of, electronic voting, that can be done, and, it can be done better. And there is the time to put these things in place if we begin now.
I would just say, Mark, on electronic voting, I don't think would be acceptable, because the one person that does that in the UK is Peter Lilly, the Tory MP. It's his company, so no thank you.
Yeah.
Folks, we're coming towards the end here. We've been on for over 2 hours almost. So last thoughts, Tommy. Last thoughts on today and going forward. Tomorrow morning, what's Tell Me Sheridan going to be doing to push the case?
Roddy, I'm enthusiastic, brother. My position is that we now have a date, that we work towards it. I think it puts into perspective now all the various events that are coming up. As you know, we've got the Hope Over Fear annual rally. This year falls on the 18th of September, which is that historic date that we had in 2014. It's on Sunday, the 18th of September. We already have commitments from Alex and Kenny to address the rally. We've written to the SNP, we've written to the Green Party, we've written, I believe, to the ISP. We're trying to invite all of the pro-independence parties to be there. Phil was asked about building unity. I think the way we build unity is we open our platforms. We send out invitations. We don't have any bars on anyone who's willing to work for independence. I've got disagreements, as you know, with various SNP positions on the bloody monarchy, on Europe, on various other questions, NATO membership and the like. However, on this question, I think we've got to fight hard to make sure it's the single question. Should Scotland determine all of those questions, or should others take those decisions for us? That's what independence gives us, the right to take all those decisions. So we need to unite around that simple, should Scotland be an independent country? Yes or no? And that's what I think we've got to do, Roddy. And I'm hoping that what this announcement today will do is it will encourage people to go into the loft or into the garage or down to the cellar and look at the placards and the flags and think about getting back involved again, because many people have been disillusioned over the last few years. I think we can re-energise the movement if we strike that optimistic chord and we put the pressure on the SNP now to actually honour these commitments. If we don't have the referendum on the 19th of October, we have the plebiscite election in 2024.
Excellent. Eva, yourself, we're winding up now. If you like, you're winding up comments. What's Eva going to be doing tomorrow after this announcement?
Right, well, Roddy, I hope you'll forgive me if I read you a little excerpt from a motion that was passed by the Alba Party National Council on Sunday.
Please do.
Tommy knows what I'm going to say. The motion that was passed noted that in 2014, the Yes campaign brought together a coalition of progressive parties in support of Scotland's independence that included Civic Scotland, trade unionists, businesses and members of the public. And the resolution that was passed by acclaim was that we were calling on the Scottish Government to explain to our Yes movement the strategy by which they intend to bend Westminster to the will of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish people to either agree a referendum or spell out another way of asserting our sovereignty. We called on the Scottish Government to name the date, which obviously provisionally they have, and we committed Alba to working alongside all pro-independence parties and the wider movement as part of the independence campaign. And in particular, we said we would support all Yes movement events and rallies that aim to advance the cause of independence, such as All Under One Banner and Hope Over Fear, as Tommy has said. So, you know, I'll continue, as everybody else here will, to extol on a daily basis repeatedly the overwhelming benefits of independence and the urgent need for independence. It's the only way to realise the potential of our people and secure the welfare and the well-being of the Scottish people. So I don't like everything that's been said today, but by God, there's no doubt that the motivation of everybody here, and certainly everybody in my party, is to secure Scottish independence by the quickest means possible. And if what we have to do is to follow the roadmap that Nicola's outlined today, then that's what we'll do. But we will be critical where we have to be so, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, which is the freedom of our country.
Right on.
I want to see before I die. Mark, what about you, my friend? What would you be doing?
Tomorrow, I'll be having my bi-weekly SSRG meeting, which is discussing the road shows. We'll have our next road show on Saturday evening. I won't be having have another engagement on Thursday, so I won't have my Building the Scottish State show. But we're just going to keep going, man. I mean, we're going to be planning more and more our conference for the end of July, and just getting the best people together and inviting everybody, just as you have done to get to, and who comes, who doesn't, that's up to them, obviously. But we have to get the movement together. and all the acrimony that's been flying around, it's very destructive. I've slightly been part of that. I'm not particularly confrontational on Twitter, but I mean, it's easy to be skeptical. There's good reason to be skeptical over the past 6 or 7 years. And so if this is, even though what Nicola has laid out today is kind of a funnel, and it starts out with this, it's this, and then this, that can lead to it. I think if it's done correctly, it will lead to independence. And like Tommy, I mean, before Tommy came on, I was basically echoing what he said. I was quite optimistic, just that there are, there are more than one. There's more than one option laid out is very important, and that, okay, if this doesn't work, we'll do this. If this doesn't work, we'll do this. Very important, and it makes it much more difficult for Westminster and the unionists to have to fight different battles. They can't just, oh, what currency will you use? Will you do this? You're small.
No, you're right. We have to control the narrative this time. We didn't last time. We have to control the narrative. The last word's going to be with you, Phil. I'm going to say you're way ahead of us in time. It's the evening there, and I'm glad this isn't Thursday, because I'll be asking you what you're doing on Friday evening. I really don't think I want to share with the viewers.
No, just no, haven't
what are you going to do, my friend?
Well, having seen the strategy, I have to say I'd rather go to war under a better general. But if it's into battle, then battle we must, and battle hard, comrades.
Indeed. Lady, gentlemen, Yvonne, Neil, have I missed anyone? Everyone that's been here, can I thank you? Can I thank all the viewers for watching? I hope this has helped in some ways. I'm sorry with a few wee technical hiccups along the way, but I hope it didn't spoil your enjoyment.
I think it was good. We had these kind of different, a good, a dialectical tension, that we had in this discussion.
See the doctor about that, mate. If you've got a dialectical tension, I would go and see your doctor right away.
I mean, so I think it was very constructive, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you for inviting me.
And to all of you, all of our viewers, we'll see you again on Sunday for our show. We're going to have till Parliament closes, and then we'll have a wee break. And I've got my grandwains coming over, and they take priority even above independence. It's for them I do it. So thank you very much, my friends. And I shall see you all on the stump, no doubt, where we work for independence. Until we see you all again, folks, please
July for the conference.
Please take care.
Yeah, and if you can have me on soon about that, I'd look forward to it. All right.
Send me a check.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Ciao.
Here we go.
Well then.
So,
we're still live.